Hey, and we're back with Dr. Mark Clark. Dr. Mark Clark, thank you so much for coming back. You've got a very long title, but basically you were in national security for 30 years, and you keep coming back onto the podcast to talk about first Daniel and then Daniel politics. And now we're going to talk about that teaser that you dropped in episode one. I'm sorry, our first episode together, when we talked about UFOs. Why are we talking about UFOs on a Christian podcast, Dr. Clark?
Well, that's a good question. So at least 70% of Gen Z and millennials believe alien life exists. I mean, if you look at population
Yeah,
surveys, so it's widespread that belief.
yeah,
Many,
myself included.
many scientists are hoping there's life out there. They're actually, if you look at NASA, a lot of the scientists are spending money on search for extraterrestrial life. So it's a relevant topic, but it's even more relevant if you think, and some people do, that we're being visited by these alien life forms.
Yeah,
So
in our first episode, you said, what'd you say? We're being visited, but they're not friendly, which has given me nightmares.
well, when we get to the resolution of this, and if so, when we get to the resolution, I would say the vast majority of things that we're going to talk about today are so far naturally occurring phenomena that are misidentified. But I'll explain
Oh,
what I mean by that. But there is this residual element of UFO phenomena, and we call our project the RUFO hypothesis, residual UFO, unidentified flying objects. Now, let me just change topic real quickly. Today, we talk about it in terms of what they call UAP, and it means the term has changed over time because of some things we'll talk about. Unidentified anomalous phenomena,
okay.
meaning
That's not just like a politically correct way of saying UFO. That's like a very
no.
specific version.
Well, I think if there's politics for it, it's because part of the effort to kind of understand what's going on is twofold. One, a lot of citations or sightings of these things have occurred around military bases, particularly in U.S. Navy pilots, but not exclusively. It's occurred worldwide since about
Yeah.
1945. So, but there's a stigma attached to that term UFO. If you say, "Oh, I've seen UFOs," people have one of two reactions. One, "Oh, tell me about it. I believe in them. I've seen them. I know them." Or like, "What are you, a knucklehead? What's going on here?"
Yeah.
So they want to destigmatize it. So the political side is, yes, it's less a trigger warning, trigger button, right? So that's one part of it. The other part, which is I think more serious, is that the anomalous part is it occurs across domains. It occurs underwater, sometimes can cross out of water. It can,
What?
yes,
Huh.
it can occur in space and everything else. So that's why they call it anomalous. And what they mean by anomalous, meaning it doesn't seem to conform to the laws of physics. Um,
I see. I see.
so so unidentified anomalous phenomena that occurs that's kind of odd, different, but it's beyond just airspace.
Got
And the reason why this is important, the real first modern wave of UFO sightings began in 1947 with a pilot by the name of Kenneth Arnold. He was flying near Mount Rainier, I think July, and he saw 7 or 9 disc-shaped objects that flew faster than he could, faster than jets could, and they weren't yet developed.
it.
And that
Mm,
began the modern wave. And then later, of course, Roswell, Area
yeah.
51, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
everything else flew. So there's
But
this.
before we get too deep into
Sure,
it, because I
yeah,
know you got a lot to say about this,
okay,
I want to wrap it back to why we're entertaining this
sure,
topic as a whole.
okay,
And I think it's because we get very earth centric and we skip over the fact that, God created the heavens and the earth. And I think that we get really limited to the heavens are the clouds that I see right now. But somehow, like, our brains kind of stop there. We're like, anything beyond the stratosphere is free game when it comes to religion or beliefs or physics or
hmm
laws. But I think it is important to really open our Christian minds to these ideas of, for in him all things were created. I'm reading Colossians 1:16, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, which to me has always been chalked up to like demons and spirits and ghosts. But maybe that means like physics and gravity, that light in some sense of the word, and black holes, and pressure, whatever it might be, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. So yeah, maybe thrones, but all things have been created through him and for him. So I'm interested to hear, for you, who's such an expert on this topic, because you've spent 30 years of your life discussing this from a national security perspective, and then, becoming a man of faith and studying Daniel and the word, how these things might overlap and correlate, and how, Christianity really does reach the ends of the universe. Because we've talked a lot with Hugh Ross on the development of the Big Bang, and if God created the Big Bang, why is Christianity just on Earth? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's actually a great entree, because I would say that although I'm an expert on the national security phenomena side, I'm not an expert on physics and astronomy. So that really is up to Hugh. And in fact, I will just mention, if for anyone interested, we co-authored a book with Kenneth Samples, Hugh Ross, Kenneth Samples, and I wrote a book called Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. It was published in 2002, and we wanted to offer a rational Christian perspective on extraterrestrials and UFO phenomena. And
How did
there's
that even start? Like, who started that book?
well, that was, I'm not sure who in the ministry, Reasons to Believe ministry, started the idea. But actually, it may have been my wife. Come to think of it. Um, now that I think of it, because she's the one who said, this will be a great book. It'll be a great book. So we actually collaborated over a period of like a year and a half or two to produce it. The name, though, wasn't our name. It was the publisher wanted something sexy.
Right.
And so
Yeah, yeah.
that kind of happens a lot. We don't have control over some things. But the idea behind that was to try to look at all the evidence that we had at that time from a physics perspective, from Hugh's ministry perspective. He's had extensive experience dealing with people who are involved in the occult and witchcraft.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he was a minister of evangelism, and he would
Right.
go door to door in Sierra Madre. He'd go to witches' covens and talk to them, and so he had a lot of experience on a personal
What?
ministry side. Yeah, absolutely.
An astrophysicist in witch covens. That
You,
wasn't on my bingo card.
no, you just don't think of it that way, right? But
Yeah.
that was his job, was to do, and he did a lot of door to door. He said, look, or one of his co-ministry partners said, if you really want to get serious about evangelism, and he was at Caltech at the time, you need to go out and see what people actually think, not what you think other scientists think. What do real people think?
That's good
Yeah.
advice.
So it was really good advice for him. So Hugh gives the physics side of it, the constraints of the laws of physics, why time travel is not possible, and why interplanetary or intergalactic travel is unheard of, impossible. I mean, anyway, I don't want to go over what he did, but he does a lot of stuff on that. And then Kenneth Samples is a philosopher, theologian, and he did a lot of research on the occult. So his parts was to explore some of the cultic and occultic ideology behind the UFO craze. And there is some, not all of it, but some of it. Have you ever heard of the Urantia book? Supposedly this was a book. It
No.
was supposed to be the, biblical Encyclopedia Galactica, the knowledge of the universe given to a person through a steady stream of information. But what's
What?
interesting, yeah, the Urantia, Urantia. But
That was like a cult?
well, some people think it's true that he got this message from intergalactic aliens. The problem is, at least fully a third of it, if not more, is dedicated to denying the divinity of Jesus Christ, which I find very interesting, and half of it denies the laws of physics.
Oh, so what's left?
Mythology. Yeah. So it's out there. And the other tie-in that we'll have towards the end of this, I hope we'll get to it, is that as Christians, we may know people that have either an unhealthy interest in it or have seen UFO phenomena. And how can we talk to them? Or people so we have what we call an apologetic, a reason for the hope that's in us. How do we help a person that's willing to learn, because you can't force anyone to learn anything, but how is a person who might have genuine questions, how can we respond with gentleness and respect to them in this process and give them information?
Yeah, we kind of keep finding areas where it's very unique to bring Christianity into it. Like, I'm not going to talk about faith in government, but that's what our whole last episode was about. And now this, when I'm talking about conspiracy theories, how do you talk about Jesus too?
Yeah, that's true. Well,
Interesting.
and what I like about that is if we keep it grounded in facts and the facts of the Bible and the facts of life. We believe, we Christians, we in the Ministry of Reasons believe there's really two large books of God's word. The Bible, 66 books of written word, which is special revelation, and then general revelation, that is the laws of physics, the physical constraints of the universe. And those two will always agree. They will not disagree.
Interesting. So you don't think it's conflicting to be
No,
a Christian with the Bible and then a scientist with physics?
not at all. No,
You think it's
actually,
complementary?
it absolutely complements. Yeah. Yep.
Ooh, okay.
So, and that's a conversation you could have with Hugh or some of the other scientists at Reasons to Believe at some point. How does it complement? The whole scientific revolution in the U.S. or in the West, I should say, began with Christians. Isaac Newton and others were all Christian. They all had a worldview that was informed, and the basic idea is that if we have the mind to reason, we can infer cause and effect from a God that gave us the image of God, the Imago Dei. Then then the two are not going to be incompatible. They're going to be cause and effect. Romans talks about it. What's known about God is evident in nature, such that people can infer reasonable conclusions about the nature of God's power, divine characteristics. Paul talks about that. But you need special revelation to get into more specifics. Who is the Redeemer? Why did he come? If you look at the book of Job, Job intimates there's a Redeemer, but he had no book of the Bible to refer to. So he was learning and growing in his process of talking with his friends through his suffering. He was learning about God and about the Redeemer that would come and pull him out to testify on his behalf.
Right, right, right. That's a really good way of looking at it. Yeah, you don't think about the people that you're reading about in the Bible are also kind of doing it for the first time. They don't have any guidance other than, their previous beliefs, but really just experiencing God and figuring it out at the same time. Because I
Yeah,
can't imagine that anything they believed prior, like a Babylonian belief, is going to really educate them with a brand new God, essentially.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I didn't even think about that.
That's okay. Well, that's a topic for Job down the road. I mean, if you look at all the interactions between Job and particularly his three friends, they don't learn. Their understanding of God is kind of it's like a modern prosperity gospel. If you do this, you will prosper. If you're not prospering, you've sinned. And Job's saying, no, I have never sinned.
Yeah.
And so, but in that way, he gets to a point where he starts saying, hey, there's a Redeemer. Someone will justify me. So he's still learning, and it could have
Yeah.
been by visions. We don't know. So there's this learning that Job does, his three friends don't. So anyway, that's the topic for another time too.
No, no, we're covering Job soon with Dr. Walton, I believe. John Walton is coming back on, and he's within the network. So this is very timely. Wow,
Okay.
perfect.
Okay. So
Thanks,
I guess
plan that.
yeah, absolutely. So I would say that a lot of the research we did for the 2002 book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, still hold.
Okay.
If nothing we have seen contradicts any of our main findings from that book.
Okay.
In fact, they affirm our hypotheses even more so. So, but I'll let you start. You can ask questions. I don't know if it's a good start or where you want to go from here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so not educated on this at all. So I think like a really good transition for this would be, I mean, I think it's interesting to know that God created the heavens and the earth. And that's the entry point for me in Christianity. The fact that it might be related to the occult is a stretch that you got to take me on that journey because I would not understand how you got there at all. To me, it's just another evolved life form that we have yet to discover, the same way we maybe haven't found a species in the rainforest. And kind of, the spiritual and physical beings are these spiritual beings, sorry, are these physical beings? Is this something that's attacking us and pulling us away from God? Is this something that is causing our country tangible danger? And like I said, you're the expert here. I don't know that much, but I did see that David Grush testimony where he was under oath talking about how we do have biologicals that we can reference. I mean, this is just me speaking as like a general population person.
Yeah.
Guide me on this. How can I navigate something we literally cannot fathom? And how does that impact me, either physically or spiritually, I guess?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a loaded question. There's
Yeah.
multiple parts to it. So see if we can pull it apart here a little bit. David Grush's testimony was interesting. It made the headlines. Everyone looked at it. But he made some claims that just were not supported by him. His basic claim was that we've had a program to reverse engineer alien craft since the 1930s, actually. That's a widespread conspiracy that's on the internet. It's a lot of people, a number of people hold, I would say a lot, but a number of people hold it. He worked for the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, which is the major agency of the Air Force that manages all of our classified spacecraft and satellites. And he even said in testimony he was not read into the program, but someone told him that we had this program. Okay, but that's not a fact. That's a rumor. That's
Yeah,
secondhand.
there's a lot of aloofness in that
Yeah.
testimony.
And then he said there were people who were harmed by alien life, and they said, "Well, who?" And he goes, "Well, I can't really get into that. It's classified."
Yeah.
So here he is, a guy with a classified. He's classified. He's not allowed to talk about what he's talking about, and he's saying, "Yes, I have proof, but I can't give it to you because it's classified."
Yeah.
It was complete contradiction. So
yeah.
his testimony was at best second, third hand evidence. Now, what's interesting, the new office that's handling all the investigations, this is part of the Department of Defense. It's called the AARO. I'm throwing out acronyms, but I'll try to explain them. The All Domain Anomalous Resolution Office. AARO.
What do you mean by all domain?
That's because going across from under the water to surface to aerial to possibly near space. So wherever we see anomalous phenomena, whichever domain, they are responsible for reporting it, tracking it, trying to understand it, and explaining resolutions to it. They interviewed a lot of people. Now, they were specifically asked in a testimony this guy gave, the new head of it. Sean Fitzpatrick was the head until I think November. He stepped aside, and a new fellow, I can't remember his name, took over. He testified recently. They said, "Well, did you interview David Grush?" And he said, "We're not going to report who we interviewed because we're trying to protect confidentiality. The whole point is to allow people to report, to come and talk to us, to go through the port. They have a secure portal now. They have ways that you can communicate anonymously, but you have to be willing to be subjected to not cross-examination, but follow-up questions. Because for obvious reasons, to really investigate like a crime or anything else, you need to cross-check everything."
Yeah.
So I don't know if David Grush actually did that. He clearly testified in Congress publicly because he wrote an op-ed piece about it, which would have violated his classified standing. But I don't know where that's led. I don't know if he reported. I don't think he went up the chain of command. There's reporting procedures. What I like about what the Department of Defense's AARO is doing is you can go to their website and look this stuff up. And you just type in Department of Defense AARO, and you'll find they have a website, and they talk about their mission, their tasks, the imagery they've captured, the resolutions they found, the reports, and it's done through a technique of intelligence analysis, whether they have a resolution or not. And
would all of those images fall within the 1% of proven phenomena that you're referencing?
It's over 90%. Yeah, certainly over 90% so far, because this is modern. Just to give a little history, the Air Force was assigned back in 49, 50, and through the 60s through a program, Project Sign, Project Grudge, Project Blue Book, to evaluate incoming UFO reports. And they kept finding the same thing we're seeing today, which is they would go and resolve it. Out of over 12,000 cases they had, only 700 they could not explain, but they could explain the other 11 plus thousand. In other words, it was either a sensor malfunction, misidentification. Well, this is happening again with the AARO. And you can tell they're trying to be super transparent because of lack of trust.
Hold on. Yeah. My brain.
Okay, sorry.
My Celsius hasn't kicked in yet.
Okay.
You're saying that they have looked at 11,000 scenarios of a flying object, and 11,000, or majority, they could explain as like a light refraction or a drone or a plane, but 700 could
But
not
could
explain,
not be explained. And
like defied physics, an object they've never seen.
well, it may have appeared to defy physics. Let me give you an example. In 2014 to 15, this has gotten all the attention in the news. This and a political report in 2017. I'm giving you a lot here, but feel free to pick it apart. A couple of Navy pilots were doing training, and what they observed to be was something that's traveling faster than the speed of light. It jumped from 20,000 feet to 80,000 and back down, beyond the laws of physics. They also tracked on radar, and they had a sensor for it, and it's called the Go Fast sensor. You could look that one up. It's out there. NASA's actually analyzed it and showed how the actual object was only traveling 40 miles an hour. It was probably a bag or a balloon at 14,000 feet that was following the prevailing winds. And this is what NASA's really good about. They can point out what the sensor looked like it saw versus what it actually saw. So they resolved that.
Yeah.
And we have much more advanced technologies now. Well, part of the problem for things that are unresolved is our military aircraft are not designed to look for UAPs. They're designed to look for enemy targets, right? So when you see something that's behaving oddly, or there's even good videos on this ARO site that looks like a ball, cruising through space. They can't resolve it, but it doesn't behave anomalous phenomena. It's not disobeying the laws of physics. So whatever it was, there's no resolution to it, but it's not anomalous. It's not disobeying the laws of physics. And that's the big claim with a UFO, UAPs. The big claim is this is alien technology. It can defy the laws of physics. Otherwise, they couldn't get here from interstellar spaces. So we need to see extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. And so far, none have been proven to be alien yet. None.
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 What? So they're just unexplained, but they're not proven, is what you're
Correct.
saying.
Yeah, I mean, the scientific methodology. So a lot of UFO enthusiasts study it with varying degrees of rigor. And what I mean by that is the most natural thing we do is if we want to believe something, we will look for and find it.
Right.
It's what we call a hypothesis confirming bias. Science is advanced by trying to disconfirm things. So, for example, NASA's mission is to disprove the idea that this phenomena behaves naturally or by technology. So it's called a null hypothesis. So it's why we can go to moon and come back, why we can travel distances across the galaxy. I mean, without that kind of rigor, we just jump and then fall out, land on the second, down 20 feet below from gravity, right? So good science develops, trying to avoid our cognitive biases, our preferences, by trying to develop null hypotheses. Don't worry about that term. It's just they try to disprove one thing. And like Sherlock Holmes, when everything else is ruled, I got Sherlock Holmes's quote here somewhere. It's great. And it's his kind of way of thinking. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever else remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
I'm still stuck on it hasn't been proven, because I know that again, this is like me hearing things, so it is what it is. But like David Grush, I think or at least he went on Joe Rogan and they were talking about it, and it was like certain levels of radiation were only existing in these one areas where like a UAP was being monitored or observed. So is that like circumstances of mass radiation or lack of gravity or just something that can't be explained, but they still happen? So I guess in your like classification of nothing's been proven, still weird stuff has happened though. Like that doesn't rule out that.
No. In fact, I would say that you could expect. I mean, one of the characteristics of UFO in our book, and still today, we haven't seen this yet, but I bet we will, is that UFOs leave no artifacts, meaning physical objects, but they can have a physical effect. So,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
yeah,
UFOs don't leave any artifacts. So like
and
this.
so supposedly they crash landed a saucer, but there's no wreckage to pick up, right? It's claimed that we have wreckage or holding at Area 51 and all that, but if you look at
But
all the,
no?
no, not yet, no, not all,
What do you think's in Area 51?
advanced military, drone warfare, electronic warfare. We've been doing this for years. The SR-71 Blackbird, the stealth fighter, the B-2 bomber, they were all tested. Nellis Air Force Range. And I've driven out, not there, not intentionally, but near the area. And I can tell you, I've seen some pretty funny things. So cruise
What do you mean?
missiles,
What do you mean funny? Like aircraft wise, or like you started
yeah.
floating while you were in your car? Like define funny.
Okay, so I'll give you two examples. One time I go hunting with a bunch of my friends at a place called Kelso Valley. It's near China Lake. So you have Edwards Air Base, Palmdale, where Lockheed Martin Skunk Works is, Edwards Air Force Base, China Lake, and then further inland is Area 51. And one night, because I'd written the book, my buddies called, "Hey, Mark, come out here, look at this." And we're watching this giant, I mean, it looked like 4 to 6 story tall elevator shaft. You couldn't see it because it was dark, but you could see the lights um, flying around, and you could hear it. And it's making this large circle around our area, and it was followed by 4 to 6 fighter jets for protection.
It was an elevator shaft
Well, no,
floating.
I'm saying just the lights of it look like an elevator. That's the only kind of recognizable thing. In other words, I couldn't
Okay.
recognize it. It
Okay.
was too big for a regular aircraft, but it was being followed by fighter jets. And at one point, it broke up into 3 distinct things and kept flying around and then came back and joined together. I couldn't explain it. They're all saying, "Hey, is this one of your UFOs?" I said, "I have no idea." Um,
So it could just be like very advanced or
very
like
advanced technology.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other one was happened in 2016. We're going to my wife's cousin's house for Thanksgiving, and we're driving towards Laguna Beach. I don't know if you know Southern California. It's sort of southwest. And out in the sky, we come up over the hill and we're going into Orange County. And out in the sky, there looked like this laser beam of blue light, but it was only, like this big. But couldn't tell. You can't tell distances. It's dark out.
Right. Right. Right.
And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, oh my, we're going to get a bunch of UFO reports. And sure enough, that's what the FAA recommends. If you see something weird in the sky, call local police. Turn on the news and we're hearing all these reports going off about UFOs. And I said, no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden, it burst to a big, giant blue scattered ball. And it's like, no, we live close to Vandenberg Air Force Base, but that's north of us. So we tend to see when rockets go off from Vandenberg, either SpaceX or missile launches. But this was in a different area. So I had no explanation. Turns out the Navy was testing its submarine launched ballistic missiles from San Clemente Island. So again, just because you see something, it's interesting, but it may not be accurate. And so those are two examples. I've seen others, but those are the two examples that stand out the most. One I still can't explain, except that my friend did say he did read reports that we are finding ways to build aircraft that can disassemble and reassemble in flight. I've never seen that, so I can't say that that's accurate. So I
What's
don't
your
know.
story? So you feel like you've seen one?
I've seen advanced military technology being tested.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm convinced of that. I mean, I've seen cruise missiles flying overhead at 600 feet just above us. A cruise missile that comes in from the ocean towards China Lake. Yeah, we've seen a lot of things. This is
Oh, okay.
California. Yeah.
Right. Right. So you're saying that like there probably isn't aliens out there? Because I feel like, in the grandiosity of our God, why stop at Earth? I don't think it's too far fetched to think that there's other creation out there, especially when we like expand his creation to beyond Earth. Why would only life be here? But you're just saying we haven't seen proof of it, or like, what is the non governmental weapon warfare? What's left? What are we left with here that we need to consider?
Let me address your first point, okay? Because there could be alien life, but the constraints of physics do not allow for interstellar travel. Hugh Ross has found research that they've shown you couldn't even fit a termite in a device to fly at interstellar speeds. It just wouldn't survive. But so there's a whole bunch of that, and there's a whole bunch of research going into techno signatures, trying to find signs of alien life. And on many occasions, what they thought would be a sign of alien life turns out to be a pulsar or a star that has a broken up um, like rings around, like Jupiter or Saturn rings broken up around it that makes the pulses oscillate, looks like a technological signature. So they're
Wow.
actually pursuing techno signatures, but so the constraints of physics are such that that alien life that could exist hasn't made it here. Um, 10 astronomers or 6 astronomers that we talk about in our book who had over 10 years of observation each said if there is travel, it's through an interdimensional hypothesis, meaning it has to do something other than the laws of physics would allow for. And these are folks that had a lot of observation time and they paid attention to the UFO phenomenon insofar as they were required to.
So this is that the biblical book and the laws of physics complementing each other.
Complement each other, right? So let's go back. Who are these aliens? Well, or let's put it this way. Again, if 99+% can be proven to be physical objects that are just misidentified, miscalibrated, misunderstood, but if 99% is identified, so instead of UAP, it's now IP, identified phenomena, there is still this small residual that is unidentified and will likely remain. It could just be that we haven't figured out how to identify it.
So the technology is just more open-minded, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're having to figure out. So this is the problem. NASA and AAR both point out all of our equipment's designed to detect things that we know, not things we
Right.
don't know.
Right.
So we have to figure out ways to get around that, and that's what all good science does: is eventually try to say, okay, we don't know what this is. Can we develop new technology or new ways of doing technology that can help us identify this? So this Gremlin device is supposed to be a mobile platform that they're testing in Texas to known UAS or UAP sites. And what they're finding so far is a lot of bat and birds in the sky. So, but they want to test it and prove the technology and then provide it, because if it's a threat, if it's a military threat that some people have claimed, and that's why the Senate's funding AARO and NASA's involvement. If it's a real threat, we want to be able to identify it. But so far, we haven't been able to. And it's, I don't want to give you the technology, but it's multispectral. So supposedly, a lot of these UFOs behave in ways they can accelerate without any visible means of propulsion. They can hover without effects on the ground. So how is this possible? Well, that's why they're trying to get this new technology. But let me go back to that earlier comment I made. While they don't leave artifacts, these UFOs so far, they do leave physical effects. Now, this is interesting because people that have gone out and investigated have found where supposedly a cross saucer hovered in a certain area, not UAPs yet, but a cross saucer landed on the ground by a farm. They could actually witness the ground deform by the presence of some kind of electromagnetic radiation. What you talked about, that signature that Grush and others had talked about. Let me go back to a comment we talked about last time we were on. I gave you that example of no. Remember that I challenged you, and you felt the effects in your body. That's my mind using my voice to cause a spiritual or physical effect on your body. The demonic realm, the angelic realm, the physical, real but non-physical realm. Okay, so the dominions, powers, principalities, thrones that you quoted earlier from Ephesians, they are created angelic beings or celestial beings, some of whom are loyal to God and some of whom are hostile to God. They can have a physical effect. If you look at any of the prophets in the Old Testament, Ezekiel, Elijah, Elisha, they saw phenomenal stuff and they were credible witnesses to incredible phenomena. Daniel himself met certain celestial beings that when he saw it, it caused his friends to faint. He fainted and had to be revived. So celestial beings, which are a different plane of existence, they're real but non-physical, they can affect us. They can have spiritual effects on us, either for good or for ill. So this is where we talk about the RUFO hypothesis. What we have observed is that, and you particularly see it with two groups of people who are most heavily involved in the belief in UFOs. The group called contactees, people who believe they've been contacted by alien life, or abductees, those who believe they've been taken up and probed, or whatever. Sorry.
Let's get into
Yeah.
it.
Well, what's really, and this is where Ken Sample's work comes in handy. He points out that almost all of them demonstrate a long-lasting spiritual, psychological, physical harm from their exposure to it, and
Harm
almost harm, physical harm, and almost all of them are into the occult or into cultic beliefs. Yes,
before. So they were kind of already in that
and they're
realm.
still in it. Yeah.
Is there any, like, I was just sitting in my bed and an alien contacted me and I suddenly went from Presbyterian to satanic? Like, or it's like you were in it, you were inviting it into your soul.
Well, we call it open doors to the occult, meaning you don't even have to be actively involved. Meaning you could have done tarot cards when you were a kid, or done a levitation or a seance, or read
I
horoscopes.
haven't, but that is like so beginner level entry. I
It
know
is.
so. Oh gosh.
So it's so in Deuteronomy talks about it. Whenever you seek power outside the source of divine power, God, you are committing an act of rebellion, and it's punishable. It's a sin that's being punished. So what you do is, by doing that, we see it in the Old Testament where King Saul, tried to open himself up to a medium. Um, these things are not benign; they are malign. And we see this with our UFO hypothesis. Some people have open doors to the occult and need to be encouraged to repent of that, to give it up. Now, even people who are innocent, that don't have that don't personally have an open door to the occult, like they didn't participate in any of that, can be affected by it, by location. And Hugh gives a really good example. When he was in Sierra Madre, he was, like I said, the minister of evangelism, was asked to go to this house, and they had a poltergeist going on. And these were really good Christians.
What
And
is a poltergeist? Just so we're
it's supposed to be
clear.
like the expression of a spirit moving around, knocking things down,
Oh, okay, okay.
affecting the house or the location. You never saw the movie Poltergeist? It's like 45 years.
No,
Okay.
absolutely
I
not.
saw that years ago. So,
Never saw The Exorcist. Absolutely not. I don't want that in my head.
yeah, good for you. Well, so it's interesting. In this case, he talked to the couple. Do you have do you have any of these things? No, we never did this. We never did that. Do you have any kind of unknown sins or not unknown? Do you have any
When
known
he was saying,
sins?
like, do you guys have any of this? He was talking about, like, do you have tarot
Tarot card?
cards?
Did you
Oh, okay.
participate? Yeah, any of that? And they said no. When they said, well, let's just search the house. They had bought this house. They searched the house, and in the attic they found some satanic ritual stuff. Yeah. So
Oh,
the physical object itself was, and if you think in the Old Testament, why did why did the Israelites have to burn down all the idols on the hills? Because that's where demons stayed. They were attached to physical objects.
oh my god.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So it wasn't them, it wasn't their sin that caused it, but it was the presence of these objects that allowed for this open door to happen.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Obviously, everything you're saying, I'm just like reflecting my own life, but it's like if you could be Christian girl, Christian boy, live with somebody who does do tarot cards, and you're like, well, I'm good. That's them, this is me. But no, you're in
You
the
sh-
same house as them.
well, and you need to at least be responsible to encourage them to not participate in that. Because if you're saying, well, you hear this, well, it's your life, this is mine, we do our own thing. Well, Christianity, we think in terms of community, right? I'm not judging you. I'm saying this could be dangerous. You might want to pay attention to that. I've known people that have been affected by it adverse. I actually have a friend who's a Christian woman who, when she heard my first explanation this one time, she goes, oh, I remember I participated in a levitation. It scared the bejeebers out of her. This is when she was a kid, and she immediately went and repented, had never had any experience ever since, but she remembers that to this day. And she physically saw someone's body rising off the bed. I know. So anyway, so yeah, so I think there is the possibility of this. I think it's super remote. I don't think everyone's involved in it. But again, I brought up that stat earlier on, about 50 to 70% of millennials and Gen Z believe life's out there. That's okay. But more people of that generation now read their horoscope than read the Bible. So they're not
Yeah.
going to be equipped to they might be exposed to the occult in different ways. And I remember during the election of 2016, there was witches' covens that were trying to put a hex on then
I
President Donald
remember
Trump.
that.
You remember
I
that?
remember that. Yeah.
So I mean, it's not unreal. There's people who are engaged in the dark arts, and I mean, if you look, even the Harry Potter series, it's benign, but there's a lot of that. Kind of like, oh, this is tantalizing. This is interesting. It's exciting, but it could be dangerous too.
I had the mom that didn't let us. I had the mom that was like, no Harry Potter, but absolutely Lord of the Rings.
That's a good mom, actually.
That's so funny. That is okay. So to refer back to the people that were contacted or abducted,
Hmm.
they were already a cult adjacent, if not a cult within.
Correct. Or affiliated with and participating in the occult or
But
cults.
it wasn't like, oh, I'm a scientist and like I'm trying to catch I'm doing observations. It's like I'm also practicing these other things that are.
Well, it's interesting. Hugh Ross, again, I'll bring him up because when it was still the Soviet Union, he went to the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences, and he talked about uh, extra or super dimensions beyond our universe. Because every physicist and astronomer knows there are super dimensions of space time, and we don't need to go into it because I would let Hugh talk for an hour on it alone. but but essentially, the universe is created in a very first nanoseconds expanded faster than the speed of light. And the only way it could have done it is if it had multiple space dimensions. So it had 9 space dimensions plus dimension of time, half a dimension, because it only goes forward. So there has to be at least 10 or 11 dimensions of space time to allow for this to happen. So he was
Okay.
talking about it to them, and they were like, oh, we're starting to see things in math about 14 to 15 dimensions, but it's behaving weirdly. And Hugh said, or you have open doors to the occult, because they weren't allowed to believe in Christianity, right?
Oh,
And they
oh,
started
in Ukraine.
in Ukraine and Soviet Russia. They were atheists officially. And when he told them about it, they said, oh my, we're swearing off this. And the weird stuff stopped happening.
What was the weird stuff in the 14th and 15th?
We'd have to ask him.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I don't understand mathematics to understand how you can look at 4 dimensions. So I don't know if I could explain 13, 12, 15 dimensions.
That, wow. Okay. So, do you have more information on what's happened, to these people that have been abducted and contacted, how it has affected them spiritually? Because I kind of like that thread of, you know, there's no artifact of like a scar on their body, but spiritually they are
Scarred.
heavily, yeah.
Psychologically and physically. Yeah. So but that's where we get our inference that some of this could be by having open doors to the occult. Clearly the abductees and contactees do, and there are a number of people who have said they've seen UFOs that we know have open doors to the occult or horoscopes. So this is our hypothesis, and we want it to be a falsifiable one, meaning let's find a way to test it in such a way that we can disprove it, um, because then that's good science, right? It's integrating a biblical worldview, along with the facts of nature, and the science that's going on, and not trying to contradict either one. Yeah, we call it the RUFO hypothesis because we've seen this behavior with certainly contactees and abductees, and some people we know and have read biographies of who believe there's UFO.
Yeah, yeah. And just to bring it back to biblically speaking,
Mhm. Yeah.
there's a lot of quotes that I think, one of our first episodes was about, demonic presence. And I think that it was like, oh, on Earth, yeah, you've got bad energy and you've got demons and they're all interacting with you. But I think this does open up to a brand new element of interdimensional and, interspatial that I think that we just, none of us go to Mars, so it's not really an issue. But if we are, we can't limit ourselves just to the demons of this earth. And I feel like one of the questions going into this podcast were, you know, are aliens affecting us physically? Or are they affecting us spiritually? Or is it just one big conspiracy? But based off what you've said so far, it makes me rethink some of these verses of, I think Second Thessalonians, you sent this to me, Second Thessalonians 2, 9-10, and Matthew 24:24. Remember that such beings can perform convincing and deceptive miracle signs and wonders. That's the verse, not air quotes, as in it's fake. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so I don't, is it a stretch to say that they're being deceptive beings and coming to Earth and being something that we don't perceive as what they truly are?
Yes, because if you also look at go back before the modern era of UFOs, go to World War II, a number of pilots saw what they call Foo Fighters. And these were these phantom aircraft that were following them around doing maneuvers, but they weren't real. They're sighted over Europe, over Asia, by multiple cultures of different people and different cultures have seen them. You go back into the 19th century, airships called dirigibles. Before a patent was actually on them, there was sightings of dirigibles. These airships that didn't exist in technology yet. They were always just at the beginning stages of our technological understanding or just slightly ahead, which is interesting about UAPs, UFOs, UAPs, they exhibit the same thing. They're not light years ahead of us. They're just a little beyond what we can understand, just a little. And it's almost as if it's a tease, a temptation to get us to focus away from the eternal truth of God to these little mysteries that never get anywhere, never advance civilization, never help anyone. And I think the fascination, particularly today with you, if you look just at the history of UFOs, there was like three, now we're in a fourth phase. The first phase was they're benevolent creatures. They're here to help us because we're going to destroy ourselves. The second phase was, no, they're cultic beings. They're all this. Third phase, so on. Now we're into this military phase. They're a military threat. They're kind of just beyond the limits of our technology, or we're reverse engineering them. I would just say on that, none of the equipment, none of the technology that you see, the B1, B2, I'm sorry, bomber, or the F-117 stealth fighter, or the F-35, they're all not revolutionary products. They're evolutionary. We knew in World War II that metal aircraft could be detected by radar, so we thought about building aircraft with wood to avoid radar. So we built them in strange shapes, but they're not strong enough. So we had to build them with metal, right? So, but the flying wing concept comes from the late 40s, early 50s. These ideas have been around. They just weren't. We didn't have the technological resources to build them in such a way that they would be uh, effective in combat.
Okay, so do you feel like those Foo Fighters or those didgeridoos, I'm sorry, whatever you just called
Dirigibles, didgeridoos. That's Australian.
those dirigibles, do you feel like they're masquerades as an angel of light?
Uh, well, yeah, they're certainly masquerades. I don't know what they're intended to do. I mean, it's same thing with this UAP phenomena. Again, who gets exposed? Who's observing them? What benefit do they offer? They don't offer any benefit that I'm aware of. If anything, people seem to get frenetic and frantic and follow this stuff. And I know people that
Mm,
are deeply involved in this idea that UFOs are
mm.
real, that the government's still covering things up, that we've got crash saucers, that everything's reverse engineered, and that just displays a lack of understanding of science, how it works, or a lack of good reasoning. It's reasoning to your best hypothesis confirming bias rather than the scientific ways try to disprove your bias first.
Yeah, I mean, just to defend those people, because like I feel like I'm one of them. You don't think that you're worshiping anything. You think that you're simply observing something that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Like the same way we observe sharks. I don't think that I'm worshiping a shark by wanting to
Hmm.
spend time with it or learn more about it. And so it's probably a lot of people are approaching it like, well, I need to learn more about this thing that I can't see, but I can't understand, but other people have seen. And I think that this conversation is really bringing to light that like you don't know what you're messing with, that it could be something that actually can't just like crash in your front yard or ruin your lawn. It can crash in your soul and like really disrupt it and,
Yeah.
abduct that.
Yeah. Well, I like that because one of the things I will tell you is that I'm encouraged by what AARO and NASA, if you go to their websites, type in NASA AUP or UAP and AAR UAP, you
Is
can
it
look at
nasauap.com or nasa.com
just,
slash
just,
UAP?
yeah, just put NASA, put it in search, Google search,
Oh,
and
okay.
it will pop up.
Okay.
And they'll talk about their methodology, what they're trying to do, and you'll get a really it's encouraging to me in one sense and discouraging in the other. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. It's encouraging in that they're going to apply some rigorous science to this. So maybe instead of anecdotally dismissing, like the Project Blue Book, I mean, they tried to do the best they could. This is now trying to make it on a scientific basis. And they're trying to look at like big data. How do you look for anomalies? How do you look for the needle in the haystack when you don't know what the needle should look like? So now you have to go back and characterize the haystack so you know what looks different, anomalous, right? And so they're really working on resolving that, and where they can resolve, and NASA's helping. And what's good about NASA's participation in it is that they're open source, they're civilian, and everything they do is public. The military obviously has one thing going against it. For example, I mean, if it's a technological thing that we have going, we can't let our enemies, our adversaries, know what that technological characteristic is.
Right.
So there is this sense in which we have to classify things on the military side, but
Yeah.
NASA doesn't have to.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that.
yeah, and FAA's like NASA's helping FAA try to standardize their reporting, so we can get. And then if they develop this crowdsourcing platform, we are going to have some really good research done in the future that
Hmm.
maybe will help bring better resolution to this. Maybe it's 0% that's actually anomalous phenomena. Maybe it's zero, but we don't know yet until we know, right? But
Yeah.
but the discouraging part is this: we have so many problems in this country. Why are we spending so much money on chasing after, I think, in some respects, phantoms by NASA and this and FAA? Great if they can do it in a way that doesn't take away from their main missions, which is to
Right.
defend us, to explore the universe. I mean, why NASA wants to do it makes sense. They're the ones that lead the innovation and effort on exploring the unknowns out there in space. So in one sense, it makes sense for NASA to do it. But AARO is the lead agency. They are the one responsible, and it makes sense. They have to be the one because there are classified programs that only they, with those clearances, could actually go and investigate.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, this is a lot to chew on. This is really
Yeah,
eye-opening. But again, like pretty low priority in like the list of things to worry about, but it is interesting that this could be another avenue of a disruption of the soul and, really impeding your relationship with God. And it's something that you should be wary of, especially if you're spending a lot of time and energy researching it. Um, just kind of as we wrap up, I feel like I want to circle back and kind of end with, what we should be talking to as to our friends, who
absolutely.
might be into the occult, the new age, the manifestation and the crystals, and worshiping these things that aren't God and giving power to them and idolizing them as like a source of power and a source of truth. What is the apologetic? How do we support them as Christians? How do we love them as Christians when like that's what they believe, but you don't want to be too intense when you're like, I'm worried about your soul.
Yeah. Well, I love that approach. There's a couple things. The first thing, always, as I said before, no bad can come from good prayer. Or nothing bad can come from good prayer. So
Yeah.
if you have a friend that's involved, I would absolutely say pray for them and pray for they always say, in walking with someone, in a journey with someone, they have to trust you, they have to respect you, they have to be curious, and they want to ask you questions. So 1 Peter 3:15 is a good approach. Always be prepared to give a defense for the hope that's in you. So you should work on that, yet with gentleness and respect. So I think that's the first approach. The second is get equipped. Our book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, 2002, I don't make a dime off of it now. I got an upfront fee one time years ago. I get no royalties and no dividends, so don't worry about that. I'm not doing it for myself. We will actually write a new version of that, a much better, I think more, because of everything else. It's got to be new material. But that book has a really good section on how you can help someone who's genuinely willing to step back from their cult. And I would say you can see it. We have it in the book. Examine their life for open doors to the occult, tarot cards, seances, levitate, any of these things. If you have that, repent of it. Repent on that it's seeking God's power apart from God, and confess to God that it's a sin. Demonstrate repentance by ridding yourself of anything that's occultic or cultish, meaning getting rid of the tarot cards, burn them, throw them away. I actually met a guy, and one of the trails up here was burning a book, something like your Urantia book, was burning it and then putting it because he thought the demons that were attached to it. We're going to bury it in a river up by us. That's a different story.
Well,
Yeah. Turn your life over to the control of Jesus Christ. If you really want power that's divine, the only person that can offer that is Jesus Christ. He's God's he's God's son. He's the one that came to die on our behalf to redeem us from our situation, and acknowledge that his will is supreme and dedicate your life to following God's purposes. Those are the steps, and we talk about it more in the book. Like I said, I gave you some other tips and things that your audience could look at if they're interested in following up on.
Yeah.
So, how's that for an answer and a close?
No, that was a great closing. I'll definitely link the book in the show notes for this in case anybody wants to read it. But
Okay.
what's like the timeline on the new book coming out? Is that right around the corner? Is that a couple of years from now?
It's probably got to be a couple of years. They're kind of
Got it.
backlogged, and I still, they've said something to me in November, and we still haven't had a meeting on it yet. So that means, yeah. Anyway, I also want to mention, if you're interested, there's some resources I have in my. Can I self
Of
promote
course.
here?
No, go ahead. Of course. Yeah.
My Substack page, marktclark.substack.com. I have 3 or 4 things on UFOs. I have a few other resources there. I'm finishing my book on Daniel, the politics of Daniel, and I'm
Okay.
looking for a publisher right now. So there'll be more resources coming in the near future.
That's awesome.
And we have some of our,
link-
I have our previous 2 videos on
Yeah.
there. So.
Yep. I'm on your Substack. I'll definitely link it in the show notes below so people can keep reading and reference some of the older stuff that we've done together. But this is it's one of those things about Christianity that like the deeper you go in, the more you realize how all encompassing God is. God's love, Satan's deterrence, it's just as kind of far reaching that we need to constantly be on the lookout for spiritual warfare. I think that's one of the scariest things that I've realized in this, seeking of the podcast and learning about God is like, yes, I'm learning about Jesus, I'm learning about the word, but like biblically speaking, the devil's everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
But I would say, remember, Jesus said the gates of hell cannot withstand this church.
What do you mean?
Well, in other words, the kingdom is going to spread. It's going to knock over all the domains that Satan holds in the world. The kingdom is spreading, and we're part of that. And it's also said, greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. And by that, they meant the spiritual powers. There's no reason to be afraid if you're a believer in Jesus Christ and you follow Christ and submit your life to his control. No reason to be fearful. Yeah.
Yes, if you've submitted and you are living a life with God, then you are absolutely protected. But I'm saying more so if you're not, you are really under attack.
Can be. Yeah, absolutely.
Whew. Wow. These hours always fly by with you, Dr. Clark. So well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cassie, and I really appreciate spending time with you. You're fun.
Thank you. Well, have a great rest of your day and hopefully see you again soon.
Okay. Talk soon.